Time for Big Ten Power Rankings right here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you stopping by for the best in discussion, debate, and analysis. And yes, we have delivered the Big Ten Power Rankings a few times. The SEC once, have yet to get to the ACC or the Big 12. No, we do not play favorites here at the Voice of College Football. I simply started with the Big Ten on those occasions and was intending to get to the other conferences, but we've got a mighty busy, hectic schedule here at the Voice of College Football with 30, 40 channels, whatever we've got at this point. So we will do our best to get to the other conferences this week, but don't hold your breath. It's a busier than usual schedule for me personally this week. But here we go with the Big Ten. Keep in mind that this is not necessarily my ranking of the best teams 1 through 18. It's also not necessarily a resume ranking, which we have delivered in recent weeks. We showed you the power ranking, which is basically my 1 through 18 of who are the best teams in the conference. And then I showed you the resume ranking. But as it stands right now, for example, I believe Ohio State's the best team in the conference. They lost a game to Oregon. They have to be knocked down the power rankings. But if this is strictly my opinion of the best teams top to bottom, I would still rank Ohio State as a 1-point loser on the road to Oregon, and a game obviously they could have won at the end. Is still the best team in the Big Ten, but they have not earned that spot. So it is a combination of my perspective, my opinion, but also with the resume ranking and just the logic of giving the results the precedence. All right, here we go. Purdue's number 18. Boiler up! We had such high hopes for you. What a comeback by Purdue. And based on that effort, they should have been able to rise in the rankings, but they did not, because we will explain in just a second. Purdue is now 0-5 against FBS teams. They have the one win against Indiana State. Otherwise, it's all L's, and they should have won this game. They were this close. They were one play away from pulling off a major 23-point upset against Illinois, but they lost 50-49 in overtime. They may have found a quarterback, though. Ryan Brown, 297 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, no picks, 118 rushing. This is a team, again, that scored 23 points in the fourth quarter. They were down 24-3, and they racked up 536 yards of total offense against an Illinois defense that we thought was pretty good. At number 18 in the Big Ten, Boiler Up! Now, following Purdue's performance, we figured that Boiler Up would rise in the Big Ten power rankings. However, UCLA was able to, much like Purdue, almost pull off a minor upset at home in the Rose Bowl. They led until 27 seconds left, and UCLA goes down to Minnesota 21-17. The Bruins are now 1-5. They at least have an FBS win over Hawaii, unlike Purdue. They're 0-4 in the conference, but they turn in a decent performance against a decent team, but go down to defeat once again at number 17 in the power rankings, UCLA. Number 16 belongs to Maryland. We did not expect the Terps to dive deep into the double digits of the power rankings, but they are 0-3 in the Big Ten, and they have saved their most recent performance to be their weakest. They are a lousy football team that has played lousy on all 3 aspects of the game: offense, defense, and special teams. Billy Edwards put up a decent stat line, but most of that was garbage. They fumbled the ball all over the place against Northwestern and losing 37-10, and they've got a date against USC coming up this weekend. At number 16 in the Big Ten, Terps. Northwestern's season is pretty much lost. Much like Purdue, though, they may have found themselves a quarterback. Jack Lausch is a gamer. He looked lousy. Lausch was lousy in his first game in Seattle, but since then, 203 and 247, protecting the football. And of course, he engineered that 37-10 rout of Maryland. Interesting date for Northwestern, coming up at home against Wisconsin, trying to run their record in the Big Ten to 2-2. At number 15 in the Big Ten, Cats. Jonathan Smith and Michigan State just happy to not be playing the elite teams in the Big Ten. They've been rolled 69-17 by Ohio State and Oregon. And the two games were not that close. Aiden Childs seems to be protecting the ball a little bit better in recent weeks. This team does have a close loss against a decent Boston College team. And, of course, a win against Maryland that proved to be much more impressive then than it is now. At number 14 on our Big Ten Power Rankings list, with a date against Iowa coming up this week, Sparty. Finally, enough is enough with the Rutgers playoff talk. They went to Lincoln 2 weeks ago. They put up a decent fight. They played defense. They couldn't score, of course. They lost 14-7. And then finally, the smackdown. Wisconsin proved to be just a superior version of what Rutgers football is. Defensive front seven, run game, play action pass, and it was not close. This was a beatdown unlike anything we've seen in the Big Ten this year. Among teams that were supposed to be equal, Rutgers, a slim favorite at home, goes down 42-7. To listen to Greg Schiano after the game, it seemed as though they just had a few things to clean up. It wasn't all that bad. Maybe he's just trying to lift his team after the emotional beatdown that they suffered against Wisconsin. UCLA's next. That's the good news for Rutgers as they drop to number 13 in our Big Ten Power Rankings. Yes, we honor the wins and losses here at the Voice of College Football. And yes, Rutgers beat Washington. But yes, we are ranking the Huskies above the Scarlet Knights based on better overall resume. Also consider when the two teams played. Yes, Rutgers credited for the win. However, 3 missed field goals. Traveling cross-country, losing on the final play of the game, racking up over 500 yards of total offense, and playing a much more difficult schedule. Look at Washington's last 2 opponents. They beat Michigan by 10. They played well for 3 quarters against Iowa before losing. Rutgers has played nobody in Michigan or Iowa's class to date. So we've got Washington at number 12. Of course, they got beat down by Iowa in the 4th quarter of that game. And now they've got a date coming up in 2 weeks against Indiana, which should be mighty interesting. At number 12 in our Big Ten Power Rankings, Huskies. I would expect this weekend in Bloomington, Indiana, for Dylan Raiola to be given an opportunity to step up for the first time in his collegiate career. The wins have come easy for Nebraska, or they have been defensive-oriented, like the Rutgers game. But he has turned in 2 successive dismal efforts, 13 of 27 against the Scarlet Knights, coming off a bye and needing to keep up with the Indiana offense. Interesting game of the week in the Big Ten. And number 11 in our power rankings, GBR. Is Wisconsin turning the corner, or just have they turned the page on a difficult September schedule? Wisconsin next in our power rankings, coming off 52-6 over Purdue and that 42-7 drubbing of Rutgers. Braden Locke is settling into the starting quarterback position now that Tyler Van Dyke is, of course, lost for the season. Wisconsin with a date at Northwestern coming up this weekend, trying to improve on a 4-2 record. At number 10 in our Big Ten Power Rankings, Badgers. With no other team is it more difficult to weigh the intersection of results, performance, and schedule than USC. This is not the 9th best team in the Big Ten. They are far better than that. However, I've got to honor the results. And USC is now 1-3 in the conference. And last weekend's performance, another strong one against maybe the best team in the conference, Penn State. They take Penn State to overtime. They outplay them. They had a late lead against Minnesota. They blew that. Of course, we know what happened at the Big House. But we are going to honor the results, honor the victors above them. And we've got Miller Moss in the offensive line faltering in recent weeks. The defense played pretty well against Penn State for most of the game, but did not create many explosive, disruptive plays. Only 1 tackle for loss for the USC defense and giving up 518 yards of total offense. Woody Marks is having a monster year for USC, but it's only good for 3 losses out of 4 games in the Big Ten, with a date at Maryland. At number 9 in our Big Ten Power Rankings, SC. Minnesota was just a few seconds away from being an embarrassing footnote in Big Ten history as the first victim of UCLA, but they escaped. Darius Taylor escaped himself in the left flat for a touchdown pass to win the game and get Minnesota off the schneid 21-17 at the Rose Bowl, now having defeated the 2 Tinseltown teams. Minnesota's got a week off before the date against Maryland, looking to improve and break through the 500 mark on the season and in the Big Ten. At number 8, Gophers. This Michigan football team is not impressive. Barely hung on to beat Minnesota. Outplayed by USC for 3 quarters. And then, of course, the beatdown in the second half, the fourth quarter, most notably in Seattle. Michigan is 4-2. I do believe that they have an excellent defense still. I do believe that they can run the ball with one of the best backs in the league in Khalil Mullings. And Donovan Edwards, if utilized properly, is a weapon. At Illinois, the Illini didn't look great this past Saturday. Maybe looking ahead to the Wolverines. Key game in the Big Ten. Key game to prove that one of these teams is semi-legit. Michigan at Illinois with the Maize and Blue at number 7. Now let's get to the Illini. They're 5-1 now. None of us expected that at this portion of the season, but they barely got it done against Purdue in winning in overtime. But credit them for coming down the field once their lead evaporated of 21 points to 0. They got down the field, kicked the game-tying field goal, took care of business in overtime. Luke Altmaier threw for 379 against the Boilers, and Illinois' defense, which appeared to be airtight in other games, showed up for the worst effort this season, giving up over 500 yards of total offense to Purdue. But they are the 6th-ranked team in our Big Ten power rankings with a big date against Michigan. It's, of course, the Illini. Iowa got back to Iowa football in a demolition in the fourth quarter and wearing down Washington in a 40-16, much closer than the final score would indicate, win over the Huskies. Caleb Johnson, another monster game. The defense was exquisite in the red zone despite giving up yards between the 20s. That's what Iowa football does. They've got Michigan State on the road coming up next, and they're number 5 in our power rankings in the Big Ten. IU offense, Husker defense. That will be the fun, near elite matchup to track on Big Noon this Saturday, with Indiana hosting Nebraska as an undefeated football team at 6-0. Curtis Rourke is completing 74% of his passes, 14 touchdowns, only 2 picks in the Indiana offense. Once again, fun to watch. The defense is opportunistic. That's what we will say. This is the first big test of the season for IU. Will they show up and hold their number 4 ranking in the Big Ten? Kurt Cignetti, does Nebraska suck? Best team in the Big Ten? I do believe so. Best team in the nation? Probably. Loser on Saturday? Absolutely. Was that a C-plus effort for Ohio State, or are the Buckeyes not as good as we thought? The defense did not turn in a stellar effort by any stretch. 2 big issues. Denzel Burke is not the corner we thought, or had just the worst night imaginable. And then the defensive line did not show up in pressuring Dylan Gabriel. The offense looked exquisite for most of the night for the Buckeyes in losing by 1 point against Oregon, but they got to take a knock for this one. Certainly, Ohio State's got a bye week. Then they've got to deal with Nebraska. It's going to get mighty interesting with a loss already in their back pocket. And Nebraska, Penn State, and others to go at number 3 in our Big Ten power rankings. Buckeyes. I got to say, I was largely not impressed with Penn State on Saturday. The defense seemed leaky, and this has always been an impressive athletic defense in recent years. And with Tom Allen running the show, they should be sturdy, stout, one of the best 5 units in the country on that side of the ball, but they got torn up for most of the day. However, on offense, Drew Aller passed a test against a good defense, not great defense, but D'Anton Lynn, of course, has improved the USC unit substantially. Drew Aller pulled through like a clutch quarterback, and Tyler Warren was a monster. If he's not the National Player of the Week after catching 17 balls for 224 and cementing his spot as probably the best tight end in the country, that takes some pressure and heat off of that receiving core that is less than elite. Good, Julian Fleming with a couple key catches, but Penn State needs to play better and start the game better. They've got a date against Wisconsin, and they've got a bye week to clean up some issues. At number 2 in our Big Ten power rankings, we are. That leaves the Oregon Ducks. They passed the test in flying colors by many measurements because even though they had to hang on for the win and Ohio State could have kicked the game-winning field goal, Oregon also left all sorts of points on the field. They got largely ripped off in the first quarter on a touchdown drive by Ohio State. They, of course, went and chased points all over the field. Their field goal kicking is sketchy, to be kind, but Oregon had Dylan Gabriel, those two fleet receivers, and Ted Johnson and Evan Stewart in particular. Terrence Ferguson is a man at tight end, excellent player. The offensive line, Jordan James, the offense, forget it. Maybe the best in the Big Ten, maybe the best in the country. The defense, you can't fault them. They held Ohio State to 31 points. This was a complete effort. This will probably usher Oregon to an easy path to the Big Ten championship game because they have little and few challenges ahead. At number 1 in the Big Ten, Ducks. All right, those are the Big Ten power rankings. Leave your comments and questions below. Please subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football and hit the like button on the way out. We are here to talk college football with you all the time, and have team channels for just about everybody up here. Nebraska, yes. Michigan, yes. USC, Ohio State, yes and yes and yes. And even some of these teams in the SEC. Right here at the Voice of College Football.